Oh, we wait for me to clip my counters to do something massive. Here's Wallace's Aeroplanes. It's a game I saw other people's reviews, notably I think Joel Eddy's drive-thru reviews, and it looked interesting. I tend to like some Wallace games. I'm not sure about this one yet. I've played it once, two-player with my wife. I don't suggest playing it two-player. It's not supposed to be. But most Euros play okay in two. This one, it was all right, but it didn't hold a lot of interest for either of us in two. And it may be that it just isn't that interesting. So I've started the setup process, and I'm going to go through the rules. And frankly, I'm doing this at least as much for my benefit as for yours. It's been a while since I played the game. I don't want to read the rules again, but I do these intros, so we'll do it here. And you're better off looking for somebody somewhere else. Other people have covered it for the overview, etc. The only reason is a matter of completeness. I feel like I should do these here. I could just skim the rules on my own. Okay. So far in setup, what we've done is randomly determine all these different passengers who are available in the cities. And this is kind of a problem with the game, actually. The divisions between the cities, it's kind of hard to see them. You want to kind of shove them together so that there's that's London over there, so that it's obvious that they're in different locations, because for example Rome here is different from Zurich, and they're placed in different places. We randomly determine a first player. That's going to be this guy. This is the first player die, something the first player rolls as turns pass around. You have a map that represents the different airline hops between locations. The locations are generally destinations, although the big major cities, which are the starting cities in the game, well, one of them doesn't have to be. There's 6 of these and only 5 players can play. These are the major cities where you can pick up passengers to deliver them someplace. And then over here you have sort of the rest of the world map that covers flights into other continents and fairly difficult to get to places from Europe. What else do you have? You have all these cool cards with the planes. These are just awesome. An image of the plane, a number of passengers that they can service, number of factories, or actually no, airports that plane gives you that you're going to be able to place on the map. And the bigger planes, as you go further and further on, are going to have more and more factories airports, more and more passengers that they service. They might have some special abilities, like this one carries airmail. Oh no, that's long distance plane. It can travel longer distances. I think this is the cost of the plane, and this is whether or not it has a victory point bonus. So for example, the Vimy commercial has a victory point bonus. If you buy that one, you get a bonus victory point at the end of the game that you can collect. So the way this is going to set up, one person's the first player, and then you go counterclockwise. Well, I screw everything up, so it becomes harder to figure things out, but I always play my games counterclockwise, so I'm going to be going clockwise for this, and each other player gets to pick a place to put their home. They can base that on a number of things, one of which is, hey, how good a passenger pile is there, as it were, because those are passengers that you can access immediately. Not that you won't have some potential competition over those passengers. It might happen. Over here you have special ability tiles that you can purchase through various means. This is going to be your money. It's bonds. They're going to go in here, and then each player also gets a pile of them. That's what you buy your planes with. We have engine failure chits here and excess passengers. If you have extra passenger capacity, you mark them, I believe, with that. Okay. Victory points and a regular good old-fashioned track going around the board, just to let you know that this is really a Euro. But it has a lot of luck with these dice in it, It's a Wallace game after all. Okay, so what's going to be happening is you're going to be making, there's going to be 3 eras to the game, and you're going to be making various connections throughout the airports and delivering passengers, and as each era changes, a new set of passengers becomes available for you to ship. And new planes start becoming available, etc., as people purchase them. And your goal is really just to collect the most victory points. You give victory points either from the planes, from dominating areas of the board geographically, and that's these. From collecting the most profit. The profit is going to be based on how many passengers you carry versus how many passengers you could have carried had all your planes been full. And the person who gets the most of that is going to get a victory point bonus. Second and third place get that. Likewise, control of the markets in Europe, first and second place get victory points for that. And in different eras, these values go up as to how many victory points. So in the early game, you probably are less concerned with victory points in and of themselves, but there isn't that much of an engine to build here. Your engine and your victory points are kind of intertwined in the sense that your engine is kind of the planes that you have and the passenger capacity you have, but if you don't use that up, you end up costing yourself victory points in terms of you don't make the top rank in the profit, for example. Okay, so the game is going to have 3 eras, and each era has an income and action rounds, then scoring, and end of era upkeep. At the beginning of each era, you get a pile of money. At the first era, it's 12 pounds. Plus or minus the choice of your home city. So for example, if you pick Berlin, you get plus 2 pounds, so you'd start with 14. But if you pick Paris, you'd lose 1, you'd start with 11. After that, you get money based on just a fixed value. So in the second era, it's 22, and third era, it's 32 pounds. And if you have any extra money left over for whatever reason, you get to hold on to that in between rounds. The main of the game is going to be this action round. And what basically happens is if you've got the first player die, that makes you the first player. And you're going to get to do what you like in terms of one action. And then the next player gets to do an action. I'm going to be going counterclockwise for this, just to be backwards here, right? Then once you come back around and everybody's done an action, the first player rolls their die to see who gets to be the new first player. Now, that is, I believe, how many spaces that the first player die moves. So depending on the number of players, you may have more of a chance of getting double turns and such. When playing with 2, it was an odd even 50-50 chance that you'd get your own turn back, which was kind of weird. Okay. The actions continue until somebody picks this up. Now, there's going to be a pile of bonds in here, and you can pick them up as one of your actions. But if they're out and you choose to take this action, the subsidy action, you take the black marker, and then the round as a whole ends immediately. And then you'll be doing some scoring and upkeep, and then you start all over with the next round. If it's the end of the third round, you score the whole game as a whole. So here are your options. You can buy an airplane card, and you can buy any of the face-up cards, but the further along they are, the more they're going to cost you. You can choose to place airport tiles, and those are going to be positioned initially on your planes, and then you can just position them in a chain coming from one of your airports, or you can take some risky flights where you try to jump over an area, or if you're trying to push into areas outside Europe, you may have to roll a risk die to see if you make it there. And if you fail, your action ends. So you kind of want to make sure that you get your automatic successes or whatever out of the way that you really want to get before you go further. You could claim a passenger tile. You pick one up, from a city where you have an airport and you put it on one of your planes, and your plane is going to service it. But you can't do this unless you have the destination location with an airport in it. It doesn't matter how you got there. Airports could be removed, so you no longer have any kind of chain or anything like that anymore. But you could conceivably have like an airport in Singapore and nothing in between it in Europe, and you can still make the flight just because you've claimed it before. Instead, you could also buy advantage tiles, and there are multiple options here. You can basically pick one up, or I believe that's $1 to pick one up, or $1 to roll dice, and you can get 2 of them at random that way. And finally, you can take a subsidy, and you'll just take $1 out of here from the bonds pool. Now, you must do something every time, and if you can't do any of the others, you must take a subsidy, which might be if you're out of money or whatever, you'd have to take a subsidy, and that could actually force you to take the black token if you have no other actions that you're physically capable of doing. Okay, buying the airplane cards, they cost you an extra £1 for each slot they are beyond the first. This is kind of like Vinci or no, it's not. Right. Okay, so you just pay extra for the further ones. You don't put little markers down or anything like that. I played Small World recently, so you'll have to excuse me. Once you take an airplane card, you shift the cards downward and draw the next one off the top of the deck. And those are just stacked there. They're all in numerical order, so they come out in a historically believable fashion. If you chose to place airport tiles, okay, you're allowed to place them direct connections in Europe. If you want to place them, you can skip a connection in Europe, and then you'd have to roll a 10 or better on these 3 dice. Now, when you roll these dice, a number of things happen. Here, for example, I would have succeeded with that 10. But these don't give you any score, and what they give you is little engine malfunction markers. And if you collect enough of them up, you've got problems. I'm looking for these special connections. These don't really matter. These just say you're going in one direction. You couldn't pump back out of Cairo into Europe. That shouldn't be a problem because you should always have some kind of airport in Europe, I think. And you can go from anywhere in Europe through these connections to where they're claiming to go. If a plane has this little long distance aircraft marker on it, that's when it's allowed to make a jump over an airspace. It also is required if you're taking one of these. I'm sorry, if you're taking one of these where the jump is on it. You could also jump over something here in Africa. So for example, I could fly from here to Kenya, but I'd have to make a risk roll of 12 to get to Ethiopia and to Kenya, and I don't get anything on the way in. Normally what I'd do is, let's say I had an airport here in Cairo, I could try to place one in Ethiopia. I'd have to roll a 12 or more. I'd get there. Let's say I get there, and then I'd get to go into Kenya, and I play another airport there, and again I have to roll the 12 or more. But if I do the jump, I have to roll the 12 or more twice successfully, and all I end up with is this. It's important because you have a limited number of airports given to you by the planes, and you can see it's not a lot. We start getting more as we go further and further on, though. There's some special cases, like these bars here, mean that you have to make extra rolls as well as the distance. So for example, this requires a long distance plane, and it takes 2 rolls to get there. That's from Dakar to South America. If you're going from Europe to North America, you have to make 3 rolls to get there. Wow, that's getting pretty hard with 3 6-sided dice, trying to get a 14 or more, and one of the dice, the ones pip doesn't even count. It's got these horrible engine failures. Okay. Well, you can get some modifiers. First of all, if you're flying into an airport where somebody else is already, you get to add 2 to your die roll. That includes if you're skipping over this space. You can also pay money to make it in. So let's say I roll an 11 trying to get on a red route. Well, I can pay $1 to bring that up to a 12. $1 per die pip. There are also some special capabilities. For example, the pilot gives me some additional advantages, and we'll talk about that later. When you get the engine failure, these skull and crossbones, some bad things happen. Like I said, you get one of these kind of bigger square tiles here with an engine on it. If you end up with 4 of them for any reason, not only does your plane fail to get where it's going automatically, whatever you rolled, whatever you pay, you lose the airport tile you were trying to place. You would have to buy another plane to get that tile back. You lose all your engine failure die rolls, and your turn is over. You won't be able to play any more airport tiles. That's okay. Your turn ends when you fail to make it anywhere into somewhere anyway. At the beginning of your turn, you can use the engine maintenance capability, and that'll repair all your engine failure chits at once. Once your plane gets into a place, you can place the airport tile at the destination, but only one person, a person can only be in each airport once. Each space only holds 1 airport. You must go into an empty space if possible. If it's impossible to go into an empty space, if you have a higher level airport that you're placing, and these get placed at later eras, I believe that shows up on here. Higher level planes will give you higher level airports. Then you can replace an airport that another player is already there. And whatever airport was your home base, that can never be replaced. That'll always be there. Okay, so another option you can make, and you can place as many airports as you get away with your die rolls and what you have on your planes. Generally, you want to do it with a goal in mind, though, like you have passengers that you can take someplace available. Okay, you can take as your turn claiming a passenger tile, and there you have to have an airport in the city that's your departure city, and you have to have an airport in the city that the passenger wants to go to. So for example here, if I had an airport in Zurich, well, I could pick up this Amsterdam person if I also had an airport in Amsterdam. I don't have to do any kind of trace at this point. I put the passenger on my plane. I have to have space for it though. This is a 2-point passenger. She can't go on a 1-point plane. She could go on this 2-point plane. You can't split your passengers among planes, but with a little bit of care you shouldn't need to do that. And you can put as many passengers as the plane will hold. Later in the game, there's this passenger overflow section where certain passengers, I believe foreigners, people who want to go outside of Europe, end up banking in here because they couldn't get anywhere from the city they were trying to leave from. They'll leave from any city You just have to have an airport tile in the passenger's destination. So you don't even have to be in Europe to pick them up if need be. All right, the next option is to buy advantage tiles. Now, like I said, there's two ways you can do this. You can pay £1 and pick which one you want. Or you can pay £2, or pay £1 and roll 2 dice, and you'll get the ones numbered. So, for example, here I would get a mechanic and this. However, some of these are only available in Era 1 and, well, some of them are always available. Some are only available in Era 2 and later, and some in Era 3. So rolling the dice is kind of risky early in the game. Let's look at the abilities of these. So the Daring Pilot, you can expend this after you roll your dice on a risk roll, and he'll add 3 to your dice. That's a lot better than spending $1 to add 1 to your dice, but, well... and you can use multiple ones of these at a time. The engine maintenance, if you discard these, you... Oh, by the way, if you get a skull, it's a wild roll and you get to pick whatever you like. It's not a bone. If you get the maintenance, you can, at the beginning of your turn, spend that maintenance without taking up an action in your turn to repair all your engine damage. Increased production. Whenever you buy an airplane card, you get an extra airport on it. And you can only use one, I'm sorry, you get to do this once. Yeah. You must have the tile in hand when you purchase the airplane, and it gets discarded back to the pool. So basically, when you buy an airplane, you get an extra airport on it maximum by spending one of these tiles. If you buy multiple airplanes over time, you can cash in multiple of those tiles. This one is night flights. You can only claim this extra passenger tile within Europe. Oh, no. It allows you to claim an extra passenger tile. When you claim passengers, you can claim an extra passenger within Europe, i.e. not from the overflow passenger. And I'm not sure if it's meant to say you can only claim one that's going to Europe. That would make sense, but I don't know. And you can play multiple night flights as an action, allowing you to grab multiple passengers at once. The radio beacon, when you roll your 3 dice, if you don't like the result, you can re-roll them, and you get to ignore your skull and crossbones. You can keep doing this, spending each time that you want to use it, and this is only available back in Era 3. Okay, you could take a subsidy. Like I said, you can grab a bond from here. If there are no bonds there, you grab the black token and you end the era. And we go to the scoring. At the end of the era, okay, the person who has the most airports in a general market, say Europe, Africa, or Asia, ranks first for this and gets the first place score. The person with second ranks second and gets the second place score. This is just in victory points that get marked on the track. If there's a tie, the tied players each receive the higher number and no one gets the second score. If there's a tie for second place and not for first, everybody who's tied gets the second place value. Airline profitability, you add up the total number of passenger points that you carried and subtract any passenger points that you didn't fill in your planes. And then that number will be your profit, and if you rank first for that, you get the highest value, second, third, whatever. And again, those are as victory points. If there's a tie, all players who are tied score the same victory points, but the players after them are pushed down 1 position. And there's an end of era upkeep. The 2 lowest number airplane cards are discarded from the game, moving time forward. If any of your airplane cards have used all their passenger capacity, they go into a personal discard pile. This isn't really that important unless they have a victory point total on them. And then you could just keep track of it on the track. But you don't have to. It's easier not to, I guess. If any of your airplanes have an unused capacity on them, you flip them face down and put these little squares for unused passenger capacity on them. And that's going to be capacity that's available to you and that you have to use in the next turn. Any unused, they say used here, but unused airport tiles will also be put on the back of any flipped airplanes that you have. It's possible that you might not have any flipped airplanes. Flip one over to hold the extra airport that you picked up. Okay. Some passenger tiles will come out of the passenger waiting area and go to the overflow. You take one non-European passenger from each of the 6 starting city locations and put them into the passenger overflow. If a section has more than one such tile, you take the one furthest from down here. If there are already 8 tiles in the passenger overflow, you stop moving additional tiles to it. Starting in Rome and ending in Berlin, you fill all the empty spaces on all the passenger waiting tile for more passengers that are in the baggie here. You'll take bonds for the beginning of the new era, your money, 22 in the second era, 32 in the third. You move the era token forward, and then the person who took the subsidy token rolls the first player die and passes that die to the new first player. Okay. I have missed how much money goes in here. Which is F. Nope, they don't tell me in the setup. All right, here we go. So there's going to be £8 in the subsidy box for each era. All right, and then the winner is the person with the most victory points on the track, which were gotten from these, on airplane cards that they have collected, and on passengers who have a victory point bonus, which you also collect after you pick them up. And is there any ties? If you have a tie, you win it by having the most bonds. We will start this tomorrow morning because we're very tired right now, but I figured we'd get things started.